Hey guys, in this video I want to talk a bit more about the Tainted Pact, the testing results, what works and what doesn't work. In the previous video I said that the main problem is leech and maintaining leech, and maybe I should show you some clips to illustrate the problem first. And then we'll discuss what works and what doesn't. Okay, what if I decide, oh yeah, I'm gonna channel Crucible. Let's channel. Now I need to stop, get another leech. Continue channel. Yeah, maybe stop it, get another leech. Continue channeling. And that's gonna be... Yeah, and then eventually got one-shotted because I'm wearing Replica Beasts and Divine Flesh with negative 60 HEAS res. So as you can see, having long duration leech is pretty important because you cannot really stop and do anything if your leech expires in 2 or 3 seconds or even 5 seconds. I managed to get 10-second duration leech, and that's with worm flask. Essentially, I use the worms come out, they have like 1 HP or something like that. I hit them really hard with the slam skill. That gives a massive leech instance, and that is the only thing that affects the leech duration. As I learned, pretty much nothing really affects leech duration. The only thing is, and most of the modifiers are kind of get applied after leech duration gets calculated. So all the things like a worm small belt, eternal youth, I tried that as well. All the things that you think that modify leech duration does not modify leech duration. It may affect, I don't understand how exactly that works, because leech duration gets calculated on hit and then all the other modifiers gets applied afterwards. So it doesn't change the leech duration, but it somehow changes how much you can leech or how fast you can leech, something like that, but nothing really affects leech duration. So the main problem is, how do you maintain long duration leech? Well, the first thing, you need to hit really hard compared to your HP. So in the previous video, a lot of people had similar ideas like Skull's Bridle, how to automate things, but how to do a bit of self-damage. But none of those work, and it's really sad. I was hoping that it worked a bit differently, and in the older days a leech would kind of even queue up, and you could queue up 2 minutes, 3 minutes leeches. Not anymore. That doesn't work anymore like that. And leech, I guess when they made Tainted Pact, they pretty much went over everything leech related and how it could be exploited, and pretty much made sure that none of those mechanics would break the game. It is still very strong, and the way I see it, there are 3 ways of doing this. One is self poison or self ignite, but make sure that the poison or ignite or bleed lasts for 1 second or 2 seconds at most, while the leech would last for a bit more than that ailment, so that your self-inflicted ailment would expire before your leech. That has its own problems, but still the main problem is maintaining leech. And if you're gonna be using Trigger Wand, even on a 4-second cooldown, even on a 3-second cooldown, which triggers Forbidden Rite, the Forbidden Rite isn't very easy to trigger a long duration leech. So I guess that's the second method. First is self poison and limit the poison duration. The second is self damage. And I was actually surprised that you need to take a lot of damage to get long duration leech. And you can actually, you basically need to use a flask with this modifier. 15% of damage taken from hits is leech as life during effect. So essentially use the flask and then make sure that Forbidden Rite triggers and does damage too. The less chaos resistance you have, the more damage you're gonna do to yourself, and the easier it's gonna be to reach the base 5-second leech duration. Now you can either do more damage to yourself by reducing chaos resistance, or you can get increased flask effect, which will increase this 15%. So instead of 15%, it's going to be let's say 20%. So it's going to require lower amount of damage to get the same amount of leech duration. But even then, it may be difficult to reach 5-second leech duration. It is possible. You can fully automate the flask, make sure that it gains back charges passively fast enough, and then gets used when it's full, and then just set up some kind of cast and damage taken, not necessarily very fast cast and damage taken loop to proc Forbidden Rite, but that also requires either skeletons, either SRS, and those even have an issue. Let's say you proc skeletons once a second with a hardbound loop ring. If you run too far away from them, they're gonna despawn and they won't trigger hardbound loop ring, and it's not gonna do damage to you. Small hits, like I said, like hardbound loop ring itself or the Skull's Bridle, those are not gonna do enough damage. Not even close. Even like Tulfal Wand, which does like 500 cold damage, that's before mitigation, so after cold mitigation that's gonna be like 125 damage. That's like nothing compared to the Hardbound Loop Ring, sadly. So those small hits will never be able to maintain. If you're doing like a full cast when damage taken loop build, like a not necessarily ward loop, but just normal without the ward, and just trigger skeletons and Forbidden Rite like 4 times a second or something like that, that is gonna be fine, and you don't necessarily need to take a lot of damage from Forbidden Rite. You can just use this flask and get increased flask effect, so that you can take less damage to get longer duration. But even then, you don't necessarily need your leech to last very long, because you're just gonna refresh a couple times a second. So that is not really gonna be a problem. The problem itself is that you're also using the amulet, and then you kind of need the glorious variant if you're not doing the cell poison. Then either Annihilation, Approach, Boots to make yourself heal, or use Righteous Fire, which you're probably going to be using Righteous Fire if you're doing the cast when damage taken loop. But that is probably quite a big opportunity cost, because you have to use the Tainted Pact and then the Glorious Vanity, which I guess you could use on the shield. You're still gonna have to take a lot of damage. And yeah, you can use some other methods that do a lot of damage, like Berserker's Defiance Pain, but that requires enemy hits, so it's not consistent. Then the Echoes of Creation Helmet, which also does a lot of damage, but it requires you to attack with Exalted Attack. So yeah, you can use those methods, but in the end, the main issue is damaging yourself hard enough and having enough increased flask effect to gain long duration leeches. And then the third option, which is in my opinion the simplest, but it's not automated, is the worms and heavy hits. Worm flask essentially throws in worms where I think they only have like 1 HP or something like that, and then you just hit hard enough to get long duration, like the maximum leech duration. And that's how I'm getting 10-second duration leech, because I'm Slayer. But that alone sometimes was very inconsistent. I guess it is a crit build, so sometimes it was critting, sometimes I was not critting, and then my damage was way lower. So sometimes my leech would expire in 1 second, and other times it's 10 seconds. So it was very inconsistent. So then I took Slayer's the Endless Hunger, the overkill damage is leech as life. That one kind of guarantees like very consistent leech. The overkill damage leech as life is basically whenever you kill enemy, however much damage you have exceeding its life is gonna count towards the leech. So it's very easy to get like big leeches, and that was very consistent. And I have some like examples trying maps. This Slayer actually, I reached maps, I did 2 maps, and I had to refund the build because the leech was working fine, the heal was working fine. The problem, like I said, is very stressful, because as soon as you stop to pick up some loot or like place dynamite or interact with crucibles, there's like no indication how long your leech is gonna continue happening. So you don't know, maybe you got 3 seconds left, maybe it's 5 seconds. You kind of have to have an internal timer every 10 seconds. Whenever your leech is gonna expire, you're gonna have to use the Worm Flask, hit them with a heavy hit, get leech, and then continue, and then hope that Worm Flask refills. So ideally you would probably want to use 2 Worm Flasks. I don't really have any flash sustain other than Pantheon Power, which if you haven't used flash for 4 seconds essentially, then you generate free flash charges every 3 seconds. You cannot really automate within jars, so you still have to manually use them and kill those worms manually. Just that alone is very stressful. Now the build that I was doing was also not really suited for that, because I was using Replica Abyssus with 49% increased elemental damage taken, and then I had Divine Flesh, which is kind of needed for these boots, half of the damage to turn into Here's damage over time to heal me. So I had Divine Flesh with negative 60% Here's resistance. That way, like, it was not intentionally, but like I said, it was literally the first and second map with this character, so it wasn't really set up, like a bare minimum to test it out. So I was taking increased elemental damage, and then that increased elemental damage gets converted 50% into Here's, and then that Here's was negative 60, so it was boosting the damage that I take from elemental even more. So I was literally getting one-shotted by like a smaller hits, because I had like 3000 HP only. Ideally I would want to cap my Here's resistance, but keep it lower than elemental resistances. If you are using boots like this or Righteous Fire, you want your fire resistance to be higher than Here's resistance. That way you will split the damage with the Divine Flesh, but you're still gonna heal more because you're going to be taking more chaos damage when fire damage, and that chaos damage taken is going to be converted into heal instead. So it's going to completely offset that fire damage taken and heal you over that. So if you want bigger heals from dots, you need to lower your chaos resistance. But the more you lower your chaos resistance, the more likely you're going to get one-shotted by chaos hits. Now, like I said, it is unfortunate and kind of sad that none of the modifiers affect the leech duration. You don't even need to be Slayer if you want like a 5-second leech duration, which could be enough if you kind of automate it. But if you're gonna be using Warm Flask, I think you're gonna have to... Like I was not purely relying on Warm Flask because I was playing the Ice Crash, which hits pretty hard, and I was leeching from enemies as well, so I was using Warm Flask when I kind of felt like I'm taking too long to reach the other enemy and start leeching. If I were to actually seriously play this, probably would play Self Poison or Self Bleed or Self Ignite and convert that with the Black Flame for the heals, but then limit the ailment duration to be less than the leech duration. But typically those kind of builds don't really hit very hard, so I'm not sure if they would be able to reach even 2 or 3 second leech duration, but it probably would work the best. And the gas on damage taken loop would also work well, but I think you would lose too much by forcing yourself to use the Glorious Vanity and Tainted Pact, and you're probably gonna be using the Traitor, which is kind of needed to generate more flash charges, so I really don't know. I had people trying all sorts of different like mechanics and building around it, but I still have not seen like a successful endgame build with this. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be some, but it's probably not gonna be useful for like everything, or it's gonna be like super expensive. This layer that I'm working on, I reworked this layer like 4 times now, but it's a very lucky seed. I found 2 divines before I even reached maps, so I want to continue this layer. Maybe it's gonna have even more luck. As you can see, my internet is just all sorts of broken. I'm not sure what is happening with my internet. This is not servers, this is my internet fault. I'm pretty sure of that. My internet download speed goes from 500 megabits per second to 5 megabits per second, and it's not just speed, it's like very unstable connection, but the upload speed is absolutely fine, no problem. So I can't really play off stream very much. The next video will be probably a bit delayed. I still need to work on this layer. This is now a Widow of Hail bob with the Poised Prism and stacking all attributes. This is like the beginning of the attribute stacking, but essentially just getting a lot of flare damage and using Galvanic Arrow, because I just love Galvanic Arrow so much with the barrage support. Oh, and if you got some ideas how to automate the Tainted Pact better, how to make the leech like more consistent or more reliable or automated more, let me know in the comments below. In the previous video a lot of people commented and I read all the comments, and yeah, like there's no like perfect solution so far. So I'm curious if people are gonna discover something that I haven't yet thought about, and it's gonna become good, or maybe Tainted Pact is a bait. Maybe I was wrong. So yeah. For now, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.